I am Andrea Tagliaferro, and I welcome everyone to Yacht Femme's first online forum for 2025. I'm very excited to kick off the year with an educational event focused on mental health. We have an amazing group of speakers and moderators joining us to discuss key conversations in this space. We will explore the complexities of health insurance in the maritime industry, including coverage, options, costs, and contractual obligations. Additionally, we will learn how to connect with counselors, access key resources, and prepare mental health support in advance. And to moderate the session, we're bringing back Sophie Spignall. And for those of you just joining us, she is the news editor at Super Yacht Times and manages the daily news desk, focusing on stories from across the yachting industry, with a focus on yachts over 24 meters. She is dedicated to informing and engaging readers with the latest news and in-depth features from around the world.
Hello.
Hi.
Fabulous. So thank you once again for that introduction. So we, in this session, will be discussing seeking professional help and health insurance. And joining me today, we have Francesca Conn from Hill Dickinson Marine Lawyers. So Francesca Conn is an English qualified barrister. She's based in Monaco and works for Hill Dickinson's super yacht law team. Her goal is always to find a cost-effective and fair resolution to the many disputes that arise with the context of your ownership, management, operation, insurance, chartering, and crewing. So welcome, Francesca.
Thank you.
And joining her will be Melanie Langley. So Melanie Langley is the director of Moore Dixon Brokers, and they provide medical insurance for yacht crews, both for groups and for individuals. So Melanie joined the company in 2010, and she is also a member of the Chartered Institute of Insurers. Thank you, Melanie, for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
So we've got quite a lot to unpack in this session. So I think let's start off with discussing health insurance as a whole to start. So I think the first question I have for you guys is what aspects of health insurance should maritime professionals focus on to ensure that they're covering mental health?
Well, I just think we should put the access to mental health support services in context, because obviously as an employee, you have a contract. So for a crew member, that's an SEA. In theory, you could negotiate any contractual benefits as part of that. Then you have a crew health illness insurance plan, and separately to that, your employer or your manager may offer a whole range of non-contractual and non-insured benefits, which might include training. But concentrating just on your contract and your insurance, if those two things are only providing the minimum in terms of MLC 2006 cover, then in my view, you may have very limited sort of coverage in terms of mental health support.
That's right.
What you might want to look out for particularly is exclusions. And unfortunately, sometimes you will see exclusions for the type of things that you might want to see covered from a mental health point of view. So there might be exclusions for pre-existing conditions. There might be exclusions for chronic conditions. You could have exclusions for any kind of complementary therapy, and self-inflicted injury and self-harm, substance abuse is also often excluded.
I think it's quite commonly excluded, unfortunately. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to say about that is that there's a huge range of insurance policies out there. So as Francesca was saying, there's super basic ones that will literally cover the minimum. Even the ones that are really good will basically only cover things like therapy and counselling. So things like suicide, as you said, that's definitely going to be excluded. And yeah, so you definitely need to check your policy, the one that's provided to you when you're employed.
And what types of mental health services are typically covered in these policies? And are there any that are particularly beneficial for mental health?
So I would say the best types of policies will have therapy and counselling for anxiety, depression, and such like. And as Francesca was saying, you also need to check about things like pre-existing conditions, because if they're excluded, then and you've had any type of incident like that before, then that's also going to be excluded. So you have to really read the wording of the policy. Make sure you can get a copy of the policy first of all. That's the bit that I would say to do. Typically, you'll also have types of limitations on the policy as well. So there'll be a maximum amount that you can claim generally, and there might be things like deductibles on any therapy or counselling. So
very interesting, actually, there. So I think a good question that a lot of people have as well is, what mental health benefits should maritime employers, are they required to provide as sort of a standard contract?
Well, I think if the yacht is MLC 2006 compliant, the answer is no, it's not required really, save for if there was an acute psychiatric condition and you needed immediate hospitalisation. Because I think the MLC's intention is that while you're on board, if you become unwell or while the yacht is at port, then you have access to services. It's not really designed or necessary to be akin to a sort of really great private health insurance plan. So sometimes, for example, once you return home, if you've become unwell and you return home, then the expectation under your policy might be that you're then accessing sort of free resources in your home country.
having said that, there are policies out there. So that's the standard, I would say. But there are policies out there, definitely, that do continue on when you go home. And also there are yacht management companies. There's also yachts that also make sure that their crew are very well looked after. And I'm really lucky that most of the ones that I deal with are exactly like that. They look after their crew. So in that sort of instance, there would be, outpatient treatments and stuff that would continue on. But no, absolutely.
If a crew member is leaving a yacht, you can't go with the expectation that these are the kind of things that are normally covered or not.
No,
you might be going into a very different situation in terms of your level of cover.
Yeah, I think it depends on the yachts. That's one of the things, isn't it? Depends on the management companies. It's individual, I guess, each situation.
I think a good question here actually might be, what questions should people be asking when they're comparing different insurance plans to find one that sort of covers mental health effectively, really?
I think the best thing to do is to firstly get a copy of the policy. That's the most important thing. And I don't know if these are handed out as standard or if there's a copy available on the yacht. I mean, I've never worked on yachts, so I really don't know how that works. I'd like to think that it's there so that everybody can have a read if they need to go to sleep at some point. But just read the policy, have a look through the exclusions at the back. You will find there's a shortened version normally, which is called the table of benefits, and that will actually give you a really nice specific sign of actually how much coverage you've got.
Yeah, I mean, normally a crew member would be under a group policy, so it's not. We have to be realistic about how much sort of power an individual crew member has got in terms of negotiating better benefits. But obviously, if crew collectively said, "Well, look, we've noticed there are these gaps, and we'd like to make a change," or if a fleet of yachts could say collectively to the manager, we were also aware of these exclusions, and we're not too happy, then that could sort of help them bring about improvements.
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit of being slightly realistic about the stuff that you can get included and the stuff you can't get included. Things like therapy, counselling and such, like there's likelihood that you can get that included. But I think things like substance abuse and self-harm, it's a traditional exclusion on a policy. So I think even, I just think it would be something really, really hard to do. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's something that would take quite a long time and a big fight from a really good broker to be able to include something like that.
Yeah, but going back to what I was saying, we don't have to just be concerned with what is an insured benefit. That a really good manager could also have sort of preventative training programs in practice. You could have well-being talks about neurodiversity, managing anxiety. These things are actually cheaper than the cure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely agree.
I think, Melanie, you touched a little bit on it there about making sure that you read the policy and read the fine print. What should somebody do if they encounter any sort of unclear or concerning language when they're reading through these policies?
I think that the first thing they could do is speak to the person that supplied the policy. So either the yacht manager or whoever it is that's in charge on the yacht that that deals with the insurance. It depends on the setup with the boat and how they deal with the broker. So, for example, I'm very much in touch with most of the crew that we deal with, and they're quite welcome to come and speak to me. And if they don't understand something, is just literally say, look, I have no idea what this means. What does it mean? Can you explain it to me in real terms? And when is it going to work? When is it not going to work? And yeah, that's basically speak to, if you can, the broker.
Yeah, but when, I mean, in shopping around, if a captain were in charge of that, I think it would be easy to put it in the context of what if, this is the sort of scenario, how would that be covered? That would be a way of knowing in advance whether you're going to have the sort of thing that as a crew, collectively you have in mind that should be available.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if we look a little bit now with sort of the cost breakdown of things as well. So how do premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket expenses, how do those all affect the mental health services that we have in maritime health insurance?
Maritime health insurance and mental health, it's not something you can add on as such. We were just talking about it just then. It's something normally that comes under the general coverage limit. So it's not something that you can just sort of either add on or take off. And in my experience, the more you pay for a policy, the better it is generally. That's a generalization. So it always is worth looking at the coverage that you've got and the small print as well. But generally, the more you pay, the better the cover.
And if we look a little bit into further care and counselling and things like that as well. So what are some of the most effective ways that we can find a licensed counsellor who specialises in mental health support?
So I think sometimes it's the insurance company, definitely. Sometimes insurance companies have networks. So you can contact the insurance company and they might be able to supply you with a list of professionals in the area that you're in that you can see. One thing that I would always say to crew, just because of the way that the qualification system works with counsellors, therapists, doctors and such like, and psychologists and psychiatrists and all this, is I would always say get a referral letter from a doctor first before you go and get therapy, because a lot of insurances ask for a referral letter before. So you have to go to like your GP, speak to your GP, and your GP then says, I think it's really a good idea for you to have some therapy, some help and some counselling. Some psychologists are doctors, so they can do the referral themselves. But because it's just quite difficult to judge who's qualified and etc., it's best just to get a referral from a doctor first.
And we spoke a little bit there, or you spoke a little bit there about finding sort of the right person or the right counsellor. How can you evaluate a counsellor's qualifications to make sure that they're a right fit for you and for your needs?
I would say that the best way of doing it really is to speak to other people, if you can. I mean, if you're comfortable talking to other people, get recommendations from other people. Obviously, Google as well, because there's lots of, everybody comments that I can't remember the name of, there's some websites that you can actually search for the physician and they'll actually give reviews on them as well. So what type of therapy they give, how their patient support is and such like.
And if we look a little bit more into what to do after you've had a mental health incident. So after an incident has happened, what are the first steps that somebody should take to ensure that there's proper documentation in place for this?
So in terms of insurance, I'll leave Francesca with the HR side of stuff, but in terms of insurance is to make sure that anything that you get from the hospital, reports and such like, you need to make sure you keep a copy of, make sure any invoices that you get, and also that the invoices are detailed. So you don't, sometimes, when it's in the heat of the moment, you just grab the sort of paperwork that they've given you and you're off, you just want to leave. Look at them and just make sure they're not just giving you a payment receipt, for example. Make sure it's an invoice that actually states what's happened, not what's happened, but what service you've received. Because commonly some of the stuff that we find in the States is that they don't do that, and you just get a payment receipt and then you have to go back to the hospital to get a proof. So you have to get your invoice. Make sure you get proof of payments and correlate them all. and then ask the claims team about claims forms and such like. And then you'll need to send all of that into the insurance company for reimbursement.
And I think, Francesca, this might be a good one for you to answer then. So how can individuals ensure that follow-up support is available after they've had an incident? And what should be done to monitor this ongoing recovery?
Well, I mean, looking at this from a point of view as an employer-employee relationship, there's obviously quite, depending on the governing law and the jurisdiction, there's quite big responsibility on the employer. For example, if somebody has had a period of absence for poor mental health, you have to be pretty careful about managing the return to work in a way that is safe and appropriate for the person who has been ill and, potentially for fellow crew members. So, you could make reasonable adjustments or consider making reasonable adjustments to the role. In an onshore employment context, you would often consider something like a phased return to work, which is going to be really difficult for a crew member. But for example, you could consider whether, if the position isn't rotational, there could be, rotational period for a time, or reducing the normal time of the rotation, for example. It's important to have within the managers some clued up employment lawyers or, sort of well-being officers to think about all of these things to make sure that the return to work is going to be successful.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that as well, just to make people really aware of these sort of things, what are some of the misconceptions that people might have about mental health coverage that maybe we can discuss a little bit here, and what should be avoided?
I think that it's either that nothing's covered or everything's covered. It's sort of one extreme to the other, which, as we've, discussed now, is not the case. There's a wide array of policies out there with all sorts of differing coverage. So yeah, I would say that for me is the misconception when it comes to mental health cover.
I mean, I think an insurance policy could be quite intimidating for a crew member to try to read. We're familiar with them as brokers and a lawyer. So it's important to, Mel referred to the table of benefits, but, it's just going back with questions and not being, ashamed to do so, just saying this isn't really clear. What does this mean? Is this, could this be improved perhaps for next year? This sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's what we're here for at the end of the day, is to help crew members do their jobs and to be happy doing them as well. So it's really important that you do ask questions if you're not sure about something.
Yeah.
And what should somebody do if they don't know where to start in looking for these services or looking for professionals that can help them? Where should they start?
I would say, again, I would say word of mouth a lot of the time. It's making sure that if you are going to go and see a counsellor or a therapist, that they suit your needs. So again, Google helps, Google searches. There's also, which is what we all use for these things. The insurance company, again, as I said, do have access to networks, so they would be able to give you a list of people that you could potentially go and see. So yeah, I would say that.
Amazing. So I think we're just sort of starting to finish up with the questions here, but is there any advice that you would give to anybody that might be trying to seek out individuals or seek out advice on further policies or counsellors? This is kind of a question for both of you. Okay.
So I would say, if you're concerned about your coverage, one of the things I always sort of try and say to crew is don't be scared to get your own policy as well. So an individual plan, you know that you are covered, you know what's covered in it, you know who to go to, who to speak to, and there's the added cost of it, but there's also the peace of mind that when you're abroad or traveling wherever it may be, that you're okay. And also, as we've just said as well, is to make sure that you ask questions if you're not sure about stuff.
Yeah. I think the only comment about having a separate insurance, you want to make sure that there's no unnecessary duplication, so it's understanding what's in place first and then thinking about how you can supplement those. But I still think we could place emphasis on, what might be provided outside the insurance context and what managers could be doing, within their HR and wellbeing, capacity to improve support services for crew.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I think that's something that moving forward is so important.
Definitely. And we're quite lucky that we're in an age at the moment where there's a lot of resources out for us. I mean, you were saying as well, it's quite easy to Google these things as well. But for those that might be looking into some of these things, I've got a list here of some resources that you can reach out to get some more information on some of these things. So we have some mental health helplines. So we have the Yacht Crew Help. And they offer 24/7 helpline for yacht crew. They also include 3 free therapy sessions with professional counsellors and psychologists. You can visit their website to find out more, and it is www.iswan.org.uk/yacht crew help. As well as this, there is BetterHelp that also offer online counselling sessions, and those are available worldwide. We also, of course, have our guest from the first panel, the crew coach, Corrine Rayson, and she offers counselling for mental health and mental health awareness courses. You can find her services at www.thecrewcoach.com, and that is /online-counselling/counselling. She also offers the mental health awareness course, which you can also find on her website as well. And finally, we have Seize the Mind, spelt Seize as in the sea. And they offer mental health courses that are tailored for seafarers. And you can find them at www.seizethemind.co.uk. So thank you very much, Sadie's, for joining me on this panel. And thank you so much for your informative answers as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you again for joining us for the first online forum for 2025. I hope the discussion on mental health has provided valuable insights and sparked ongoing conversation on this important topic. We couldn't have made this possible without the support of our sponsors, Robert Allen Law and Crusoe. You can find their links to their websites in the descriptions and all our online media. Our next forum is the next month, followed by another one in March, and another one ends in April. So 4 forums back-to-back all the way to April. Topics will include economy, legal trends, leadership, entrepreneurship, and the future of luxury marketing. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you on our next Yacht Femme event as we continue to empower women in the yachting industry. So thank you all.